الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And may Allah reward you all and the organizers for giving me that great pleasure of being amongst you today. There were basically two topics assigned to me for this forum this year. One deals with Salah and the other deals with the preservation of the Quran. To begin with, as you see on the screen, the basic outline for presentation begins with some introduction. It goes on to address the so-called internal evidence within the Quran itself of its preservation. Thirdly, we look at the external evidence by examining the three major stages in which the Quran was preserved at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr and Uthman. In the fourth topic or sub-area, depending on the time available, we might touch at least on some of the objections raised by Western scholars or Orientalists or others and respond to a few at least of them and a conclusion, inshallah. In the following slide, we begin with the introduction, which makes basically 3 points. First of all, that there are two primary sources for Islam. All others are regarded as secondary. The two primary sources are the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The reason they are called primary is that both of them are revelatory in nature. They are based on the revelation either in word and meaning, as is the case with the Quran, or revelation of meaning with the Prophet ﷺ using his own words, as we find in Hadith or Sunnah. The second major point then is that in addition to their importance being primary sources, the Quran has had a great impact on history. It changed the lives of countless millions of people who embraced Islam. And it did influence the whole world, even Islamic and non-Islamic world. The Quran was the moving and dynamic force behind those changes. And until today, as you may hear of the stories of some of those who came to Islam, like Yusuf Islam and others, that oftentimes it began even by reading an interpretive translation of the meaning of the Quran, like Yusuf Ali and others, which does not even fully capture the original Quran yet. It was sufficient in many cases to make a lot of people see the light. Now, to speak in one session about preservation and Quran, of the Quran and Hadith is a bit too ambitious. So I thought for maximum benefit to just focus on the Quran and not the whole Quran again. Why? When we speak about primary sources and when we try to learn how to respond to objections and all the campaign to discredit Islam, its teaching, its prophet, and its book, then we need, in fact, to make sure of two things. First, how do we know that the Quran indeed is the word of Allah? What to say to those who say the Quran is just a book that was written by a group of people similar to the various authors of the Bible, for example, or that the Quran was written by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, as you find typically in most social studies books, Quran written by Muhammad. If they don't say it directly even, they quote ayat in the Quran and says Muhammad said, and they quote the Quran, implying that he was the author. Or those who say that the Quran basically is a sort of compilation from various sources, because there are similarities between the Quran and Bible and other sources, apocryphal literature even. So what the Prophet must have done is simply to study all of this and sort of make a term paper incorporating all of these. That's what we call perhaps the issue of authority of the Quran. And again, that required a separate presentation itself. Even in the most superficial way, it required a whole session. But that was not the topic really assigned to me. The other aspect of ascertaining why the Quran is very important for Muslims and why it's not just a matter of authority but also authenticity. By that we mean, well, suppose the Quran is proven to be the word of Allah and there is lots of evidence to that effect. How do we know that the Quran we have today is the same as uttered by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, without editing, without tampering, without addition or deletion? Both the issues of authority and authenticity of the Quran are usually referred to, along with other sciences, as the sciences in plural of the Quran, which include, beside these two issues, pertaining to tafsir, occasion of revelation, naskh, which I like to translate as supersession rather than abrogation, and many other areas, the division of Makki and Madani revelation. This is a huge field in itself. I just want to give a sort of outline only. So that basically sets the parameter or show where the topic today fit as a humble little point in a whole spectrum of areas pertaining to the Quran. In the second sub-area, I just wanted to address first, if we can move that down, please, and move that up, the internal evidence. This is something which is acceptable in scholarly circles of Islamic studies, biblical studies, and other, that before you analyze anything, look first as to whether a claim is made internally, whether we deal with authority or authenticity. We're focusing on authenticity. That's the question should come first. Not that this is sufficient, because anyone can write anything and put any evidence in that, but as a beginning point. So the basic question we have here, number one, is there any evidence in the Quran itself, from within the Quran, that it will be preserved? First of all, we note that we do have explicit and clear statements in the Quran that it will be preserved. And the surah and ayah number that you see on the screen, 15:9, is only one example, but it's one of the oft repeated and quoted ayahs from the Quran, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks, "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun." You must have heard that many times. It is we means Allah. We here is the plural of majesty, not a committee of gods. It's we who revealed the reminder. Reminder is a reference to the Quran. And it is we, Allah, that we're going to take care of preserving it. Like I said, this is only one. You find other ayat in the Quran. وَإِنَّهُ لَكِتَابٌ عَزِيزٌ لَا يَأْتِيهِ الْبَاطِلُ مِنْ بَيْنِ يَدَيْهِ وَلَا مِنْ خَلْفِهِ تَنْزِيلٌ مِنْ حَكِيمٍ حَمِيدٍ. That's in Surah 41. We find evidence also when the Prophet